What's going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rage, and I'm back with some more Diablo 4 content for the channel. Now today we are going to be having a look at some more of those uniques and being able to discuss and be able to review as to how useful those are going to be when it comes to endgame content. And while the rogue list did pretty well, I am looking forward to being able to do this because Druid was my second main class to be able to take part in when it came to the betas, and I thought while the Druid was kind of a little bit lackluster in terms of damage output, it did one thing really well, and it was just the top of its game when it came to that, and that's crowd control. Now what I'm looking for when it comes to these items is ways to be able to increase their damage output, ways to be able to increase their survivability, or ways to be able to like take and capitalize on that crowd control to find out if there's ways that we can like specialize into something when it comes to the Druid. Now if you are enjoying these videos and you are enjoying the Diablo 4 content, make sure to drop a like and subscribe on the channel. It really does help the channel out, and we'll definitely be bringing a lot more Diablo 4 content coming your way, and even more so when it actually drops over in June. But with all that said and done, let's get right into the list. Alright, so same as before, we have 8 items to be able to discuss and to be able to review, and we're just going to work our way from the top of the list all the way down to the bottom and be able to take it from there. So the first and foremost, we have a one-handed axe, and this is going to be called the Waxing Gibbous. Now what this ability will be given is gain stealth for X amount of seconds when killing enemies with Shred, and breaking stealth with an attack grants ambush, which guarantees critical strikes for X amount of seconds. Now, on paper, this sounds pretty decent, to be fair. I think this is a really nice way to be able to increase the amount of damage output that the Druid will have. Having that extra kind of like critical strike chance, although just guaranteed critical strikes in of itself, is pretty good, to be fair. The stealth in of itself, not necessarily needed, especially in solo combat, because the Druid was already fairly tanky. It was able to take a lot of hits. It was able to stand in the middle of a crowd, especially if built right. With the amount of fortify that they have and ways to be able to generate and to be able to, it just allowed you to be able to take a lot of hits. So the stealth is a nice way to be able to take off some of that aggro, but not necessarily needed. It's just purely, it's kind of more like a gimmick to be able to get you into the ambush state ready for that critical strikes. Now that's not to say that it's completely pointless. There are times that you probably will like to have some stealth, especially if you do get overwhelmed a little bit as you're starting to level up and everything like that. So I can see a use for it. It's not a case that I just don't think it's completely like wasted or anything like that. But it's definitely the ambush side of things that's just going to be really good. I like the idea of the critical strikes. It'll be interesting to see how long that will be. I imagine it's only going to be on the short side, so maybe like 2 or 3 seconds or something like that. But that's still more than enough time to be able to get a few of your strikes in, to be able to deal a massive chunk of damage, and then start moving your way onto the next horde, or to be able to take on the next enemy, and you've weakened them enough, the ones that are still standing, to be able to then finish them off. Overall, I can kind of see a use for this, especially if we start going into the skill tree in terms of like what rely on critical strikes to be able to get there. So I'm going to say it's a nice like utility-based kind of unique in that sense. So I'd probably give it maybe a 7 out of 10. I think it doesn't really fix the problems that the Druid had when it came to DPS or anything like that. It does give it some nice utility, it gives them some nice survivability, it gives them some nice a nice increase in DPS, but it's not enough to be able to fix it, to be able to put it onto the likes of Rogue or Necromancer or anything like that, or Sorcerer especially. It just kind of, it's kind of like a band-aid over the massive like crack in the wall or anything like that. So I think it's decent. It's probably okay. It probably will be used. I just don't think it's like the fix, the be-all and end-all. It'll be the meta or anything like that. So next up we have the Greatstaff of the Crone, and what this does is it takes the Claw skill and it now turns it into a Storm skill as well, and also casts Storm Strike at X% increased normal damage. Now whether this is actually going to be an increase or a decrease is yet to be seen. I imagine this would be because it is a unique, it will have an increase in the amount of damage that it will deal, but Claw was a basic skill that was just a werewolf skill in of itself. It allowed you to be able to go into shapeshifting, but now we can go into Storm skills at the same time, and this will play dividends into some of the other builds as we go a little bit further down into the Druid. As you start leveling up and you start unlocking like the key passives or into the ultimate skills and everything like that, it kind of requires you to be able to get the most out of the Druid anyway. You need to be able to not focus purely on like Werewolf, or focus purely on Bear, like Werebear, or focus purely on Storm. It's kind of like a mingling of the two. You kind of need to take everything and or to be able to maximize the amount of DPS or the amount of utility that you can get in the class. And this is no exception. This means that we can now use Claw as a skill to be able to use into Storm as well as our Werewolf skill, so we can cross crossbreed in a sense, those two classes. So Claw was a decent enough skill to be able to start generating spirit. It just does physical damage, turns you into a werewolf, and you can enhance it to be able to do some poison damage and to be able to increase its attack speed or something like that. So overall, it's a decent skill. It's not like the best skill, as far as I'm aware, when it came to this, to be able to generate spirit or anything like that. It would then have to compete with something like Storm Strike, which I thought was probably the best one, because that gave you some utility with damage reduction. It gave you Storm, which is what you're trying to do with this unique with Claw. It allowed you to be able to damage enemies from a little bit further away, etc. So the utility that Storm Strike had over Claw was massive, but that's not to say that Claw is terrible or anything like that. I just don't think it's the play when it comes to it. I feel like this unique would kind of benefit a lot more if we knew every single aspect that's going to be coming out for the Druid. As it currently looks, we really only know what the skills are. We only know so much of the aspects and everything like that. And while Storm builds were pretty decent when it came to the beta, they were able to hold their own and everything like that. There's not enough information as it currently stands to know if Claw is actually going to play an integral part in that, if this is actually going to be the best way to be able to go or anything like that. I don't know. I just don't see that kind of happening. So as it currently stands, we need a little bit more information, but I'll be giving this maybe a 4 out of 10. I'm just going to go a little bit less than average just because on paper it doesn't sound like it's going to be that impactful, but it definitely has some potential to be there depending on what the other aspects in the build are going to be. So maybe this could actually like start popping off or something like that. So I'm going to give it a 4. I think that's acceptable for the time being. I just think if I was going any lower, I'd probably leave those ranks to something that I know is absolutely dreadful and is just not going to do anything for the class when it comes to it. So yeah, a 4 out of 10 it is, and we're going to move on to the next one. Now, while I said we're going to do the next one, I'm actually going to pair both of these together, and that's because they do very similar things, just one slight change on each of these ones to be able to differentiate. And this is going to be the Mad Wolf's Glee, which is a chess piece where werewolf form is now your true form, and you gain +2 ranks to all werewolf skills. And then we also have the Insatiable Fury, which is basically the exact same, except for instead of the werewolf, we're now doing the werebear. Now, this kind of goes a little bit against the skill tree, only a tiny bit though, because there was one skill that was very important when it came to like transformation kind of builds, and that was going to be something called Clarity. Now, Clarity was a node that allowed you to be able to gain 2, 4, or 6 spirit every single time that you transform back to a human form. And the reason why that was important is because you didn't have to use as many basic skills or many as casts to be able to then start stacking up your resource. It was a great way to be able to go back and forth between it and then start actually like offsetting the amount of energy that you were actually going to be using with those main skills. The reason why this now becomes a problem though is because if the werewolf form or the werebear form is now your true form, that does mean that you're then not necessarily changing back to human to be able to then get the benefits of that class node. Now granted, that means that you do have more points to be able to put somewhere else in the skill tree, but in the same respect you're now not getting that, meaning you have to now rely on a brand new resource generator, or on the resource generator that you're already using a little bit more to be able to then start casting your skills. Now on paper, that's not a massive problem, I suppose. I mean, it's not like Clarity was the sole reason you weren't using a basic skill. It was just kind of there to be able to allow you to cast even more skills over and over again without having to worry about swapping back to a basic skill where you were doing kind of piddly damage just to be able to generate your resource back. I suppose the real benefit of this though is going to be that +2 ranks to all werewolf skills, which, considering how many skills there are in Diablo 4 for the Druid when it comes to werewolf and werebear, is pretty decent, it's pretty tasty, it's pretty nice, and that means that you're going to be dealing even more damage, but you're also going to be getting more benefits. So in the case of the Bloodhound or something like that, you're regenerating more health, etc. So overall, it's a good trade-off in that sense. You probably will be better off actually swapping out Clarity for another 3 points into somewhere else to be able to get, and then just relying on like your actual basic skills to be able to generate your spirit back. But you know, it's one of those. It's a little bit tricky. It's kind of like you'd have to build all the way around it again. Now, there potentially could be one big benefit to this, and that's the fact that because you aren't transforming back to a human, that's the only node that really affects you going back to your human form, and that's just Clarity, which means that all the other nodes where it allows you to be able to change into a different form, if you actually start mixing up a werewolf with a werebear skill, just having the one, it means that you constantly go back and forth. That potentially could mean that you could have your basic skill set to the other sides. That means that potentially you could have you could be using the Mad Wolf's Glee to be able to stay as a werewolf, and then use your basic skill as Maul to be able to then start to transform into that Werebear to be able to get the benefits of all those class nodes that you do trigger when you start changing into a different ability. That way you are still gaining the benefits of being able to shapeshift back and forth between different forms, but you're also then getting the maximum +2 ranks to all your werewolf skills for all of that DPS that you're planning to be able to do afterwards. And of course it works the other way around as well, so if you were staying as a Werebear all the time, and then you can actually use Claw, which is a werewolf skill, to be able to then trigger all of your spirit generation, to be able to trigger all the rest of the class nodes, you can then transform back into a Werebear to be able to get the main benefit of all the DPS that you're going to be outputting with your other skills. Overall, I'm very interested in both of these pieces. I think it will be nice to have both so that you can then make a build around a werewolf and a werebear, but ultimately all you're going to be doing is swapping out the main skills. So it'll literally be a case of you'll have one skill that is a werewolf for when you're staying as the werebear, and the rest will be werebear skills, and then it'll be vice versa if you were going the other way around. It'll be interesting to see if the werewolf or the werebear is going to be the predominant one. What I do remember and recall quite vividly was around in the times of the beta is that people that had early access announced that the werebear skills or the werebear builds were pretty good for when it came to endgame, so werebear might be the best way to go, and if that is the case, then the Insatiable Fury will probably have a little bit more of an edge compared to that of the Mad Wolf's Glee. I'm actually going to use that to factor in my decisions on both of these pieces, and I think the Mad Wolf's Glee on paper sounds pretty good, so what I'll be giving that is a 7.5 out of 10. And then because the Werebear has the higher potential when it comes to DPS and being able to do endgame content, I'm actually going to give the Insatiable Fury an 8 out of 10. Either way, both of these are going to be pretty good, and I can see an argument being made that you will probably need one or the other when it comes to having a shapeshifting build, at least be able to having those extra skill points ready into your class tree. So now we're on to one of the Helms, and this is going to be the Tempest Roar. And what this says is, on lucky hits, storm skills have a X% chance to be able to grant X Spirit. So we're getting a great way to be able to start stacking up our spirit generation once again with this. And your base storm skills are now also werewolf skills. So this kind of feeds back into, it's almost like a flip around of the other way for the Greatstaff that we did cover a little bit ago, like a little while ago, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works. And the reason why is because we don't have like a class of skills when it comes to this game known as base storm skills. We have our storm skills, which are going to be things like Storm Strike and Tempest and all the way down there, but none of them are actually classified as base. We do have basic skills, and maybe it is just a translation, or maybe it's just basically like a typo or something like that. It definitely could be, in which case that would just mean that Storm Strike is the only one that's going to be affected and changed into a werewolf skill. Or it could mean that because if your skills are already storm-based skills, like they have that tag literally on them as a skill, that means that every single one of those skills could now be werewolf skills, allowing you to be able to transform into a werewolf, to be able to cast them, and then you benefit from some of the other shape-shifting nodes. Now, I wasn't able to make a storm build when it came to the beta. I ran out of time being able to try and farm for the necessary components to be able to actually make it work, especially with the aspects that you do actually need when it comes to playing as a druid. But overall, I do know they were pretty decent. I know they were able to hold their own. I know they were able to have a decent amount of damage output, and were probably easier to be able to build than something like, say, a werewolf or a werebear build, considering the level cap that we had access to when it came to the beta. That being said, it's not quite apparent as to how useful this is going to be able to change into a werewolf, or to be able to grant extra spirit and everything like that. So it kind of depends on those numerical values that we're just kind of missing as it currently stands. I think it would be nice to have extra ways to be able to generate spirit, because that means then we're casting even more damaging abilities off, to be able to get special effects, everything like that, to be able to then start popping off and then snowballing our way as a druid, to be able to then start mowing through the classes. With that in mind, I'm going to probably give this a 6.5 out of 10. I think there's not enough information. There's not really anything in here that kind of helps the build straight away or anything like that. You still need to be able to build into werewolf skills to be able to then get the benefit, which means that you're now putting points into werewolf skills as well as your storm skills to be able to then get the extra benefit or the extra payoff when it comes to actually equipping this aspect. As such, I'm not a massive fan as it currently stands, but it could be the case that it has the potential to be able to help make the rest of the build. And as such, I'm just going to play it easy. I'm just going to say 6.5, and then I'll quite happily review that if we do find out that it's actually going to play a vital role when it comes to certain builds. Our next one is going to be another helmet, and once again this plays off like with the other helmet that we just discussed, taking one of your base skills and then turning it into another of the shapeshifting, allowing you to be able to then cross build. So with this one we have Vasily's Prayer, and what this means is your earth skills are now also Werebear skills and will fortify you for X amount. Now, on paper, I genuinely love the idea of this. The reason why is because in the beta I was running an Earth build, and I was also running a couple of Werebear skills to be able to play off that, to be able to then enhance my damage output, to be able to enhance my durability, to be able to give me the nice tankiness I need to be to right in the middle of a group, to be able to then crowd control them, to be able to hit them really hard, and then start moving on to the next group. Now, Earth skills and Werebear skills did have some really nice synergy when it came to it, at least in my playthrough. Now, while we're still trying to decide like the meta builds in that kind of sense, I do know that these actually do work quite nicely together, and there are some great things that do actually work in tandem. On top of that, we are also being able to fortify ourselves, which not only does have synergy with the Earth skills, it's also going to be a great way when paired with the Werebear, when the Werebear can now allow you to be able to do damage reduction on certain enemies, especially when you make it a little bit further down the skill tree and you do have access to some of those better skills. Overall, I think this is a great combination of Earth skills, which are basically defensive or crowd control, and Werebear offering some really nice damage output and some DPS. So because the two do kind of go hand in hand in that sense, I think it really does help the build out. In which case, this is probably one of the better ones that I'm looking forward to. It's probably one of the more hyped. So I'm kind of interested in being able to give this an 8.5 out of 10. Obviously, it doesn't do too much in terms of like just by itself increasing your DPS or anything like that, but it does offer some great way to be able to increase your defense, to be able to give you some nice utility, being able to stay in the fight, which you're already able to do with your Earth skills, but now it's playing into the Werebear skills to be able to increase the amount of damage that you can offer in that sense. So I'm excited to be able to make a build when it comes to that. I can see that being a key part of that build as well, and so I think I might have to give that an 8.5, and I probably would bump it up even higher if it does turn out to be the way that I'm expecting it to be. So the last but one item that we do have on the list is going to be Storm's Companion. Now these are pants, and what this means is your wolf companions are infused with the power of the storm, dealing lightning damage and gaining the Storm Howl ability. Now right off the bat, unfortunately, we do not know what the Storm Howl ability actually is. As far as I can tell, and after having checking online, I can't find anything that actually tells us what that could be. The closest we have is Blood Howl, and Blood Howl is that ability that you're able to cast to be able to regenerate a certain amount of health. And while that could be pretty good for your companions, ways to be able to increase both their own HP as well as people that are nearby, because there was ways to be able to adapt that with certain aspects so that you can heal allies as well with the Howl. So I could see that potentially being pretty good, especially if you have two wolves and they start casting that. They're both healing you, they're both healing each other, they're just having some nice sustain, and they possibly could be healing allies at the exact same time. It could be a really nice way to be. It could be a really nice combination of that altogether, if that's the way that it's going. But unfortunately, that's just pure hearsay. That's just pure like theorizing on my side, because we have no idea what the Storm Howl ability actually is. That being said, your wolf companions are now infused with the power of the storm, and dealing lightning damage really pairs well with the Tempest Roar to be able to then start going into storm skills, because you're going to be doing lightning damage with that. You can see that werewolves are designed with in mind to be able to go with storms, and you can also see that earth skills are designed to go with werebears and everything like that. So I can see if you are able to equip more than one unique, which I imagine would be the case, then you would start actually building it up from there, and it would just be really nice synergy to be able to go around. So overall, it potentially could do really well with being able to help make a build and everything like that. So I'm probably going to give this more a 7 out of 10. I just don't think that it's helping the wolf companions out too much in of itself. There may be a way to be able to build around it, and there may be a way to be able to capitalize on all the lightning damage that it will be doing, but it's all going to hold on that Storm Howl ability as to what that actually is and what utility that would be bringing. But I like the idea of it. I like the synergy that it's going to be bringing with the Storm build and the Werewolf build. So I think it's just good enough to be able to have that 7 out of 10 rating from me. And then last but not least, we have the ring, which is the Hunter's Zenith. And what this is gain a bonus when you kill with a shape-shifting skill, and this bonus will vary depending on what form you are in to be able to land that kill. If you're in Werewolf, your next non-ultimate Werebear skill will cost no resource and has no cooldown. And if you were in a Werebear form when you got the kill, your next Werewolf skill will heal you for X amount of damage when it's first dealt. So the Werebear, getting killed with the Werebear is probably the worst of the two, if I'm being completely honest with you. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have that heal, and obviously it will depend basically on how much that number is for what the damage is when the first is dealt, but just having that next non-ultimate Werebear skill cost no resource with no cooldown is crazy. And I like the idea that you can go back, you can just constantly go back and forth between each other. So if you were, for example, doing a full-on shape-shifting build and you've got a kill with the Werewolf to be able to start it all off, you've then got a free ability to be able to cast straight away, to be able to do some damage. If you've got a kill with that, you then start healing yourself with the Werewolf skill. And then getting the Werewolf skill, you go back to dealing even more damage with no cost. It's a great way to be able to save up on Spirit. It's going to take away from like being able to have some downtime with your DPS when you have to do Spirit generation or anything like that, because this just completely nullifies that. It takes away the cooldown, which some of the abilities do have. I like the idea of this. I think it's really good. It's very niche if you are going for that build, if you are going back and forth between it, but if you pair this with something like the Mad Wolf's Glee or the Insatiable Fury, where you're going back and forth between forms anyway, I think the possibilities are endless. I think this is probably the better, or one of the best items that's going to be in it. I do think that Vasily's Prayer is one of the better ones as well. So I'm going to give Hunter's Zenith an 8.5 as well out of 10. I like the idea of what it can potentially bring to the build. I like the idea that you can just purely make a shape-shifting build and just go back and forth between the two. I like the idea that it has some synergy with the Mad Wolf's Glee and Insatiable Fury. And I can also see an argument to have all like 3 of these on, where you have Insatiable Fury with Vasily's Prayer, with Hunter's Zenith, and you're just starting to stack up all that damage. Overall, very good list, very good ending as well, very strong, and yes, an 8.5 out of 10 just seems right to me. But there we go, that is all of the 8 items that we currently know when it comes to uniques for the Druid class, all the ones that have been leaked so far. Now, just remember that all of this is subject to change. There's a reason why it has the X instead of the actual number in there, and that's possibly because it will change as you start leveling up through the class as well. It's not going to be a flat number, but on top of that, it is all subject to change because of the fact that they are still working on this, ready for the game's release when it comes to June. But massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video. Massive thank you to the Babylonian family as always for their continued support. Let me know in the comment section down below which of these 8 items was your favourite, which ones are you looking forward to being able to do, and what would you potentially do in terms of like a build. Are you going to start cross-classing? Are you actually going to have a pure shape-shifting build between Werewolf and Werebear? Are you going to start going into Storms and Werewolves? Are you going to go into Earth and Werebears? The possibilities are pretty much endless by the sounds of things. It's just, they're just finding ways to be able to cross everything all over together and just have some synergies like that. But just a friendly reminder that if you did enjoy the content today and you do like the idea of being able to watch some more Diablo 4 content from ourselves, then make sure to drop a like and subscribe to be able to find your way back to the channel. But with all that said and done, that just leaves me to say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on our next video.